Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today, we begin a journey, not just through time, not just through stories, but through the heart of Buddhist wisdom. In the coming episodes, we will explore timeless tales from the teachings of the Buddha, simple stories with profound truths, passed down over centuries, across cultures, and into the present moment. These are not just tales of monks, kings, or animals. They are reflections of our own lives, our struggles, our desires, our fears, and our hopes. Each story carries with it a lesson about compassion, patience, humility, mindfulness, or the nature of suffering and happiness. You don't need to be a Buddhist to find meaning here. These are human lessons, universal, enduring, and deeply relevant to the world we live in today. So take a deep breath and let your mind be still for a moment. As we begin this journey together, may each story not only entertain but also inspire you to see life with greater clarity, kindness, and peace. Let us begin. Long ago, there lived a man named Bu, who was widely known not for his charm or intellect, but rather for his unattractive appearance and impoverished background. Born into a poor family and lacking formal education, Bu scraped by working as a porter in the bustling marketplace. People around him mockingly referred to him simply as Thang Bu. Despite his modest means, Bu was known to be diligent and capable, and as a result, his life, though humble, wasn't overly burdensome. However, deep inside, Bu felt a persistent sorrow. No one around him seemed to show him any respect or regard. Like most people, he too longed for recognition, admiration, and the sense of power that came with being esteemed by others. Unfortunately, Bu was far from handsome, and he lacked the vocal talents needed to become a singer in Ci Lang or modern music. So a career in the performing arts was not a viable path. Moreover, he had no relatives or wealth to fall back on, so buying fame or status was equally out of reach. And academically, he was no better than the average man, likely worse. So he often wondered, how could he ever make people fear and respect him? After days and nights spent mulling over his dilemma, an idea finally struck him like lightning, something bold, perhaps even absurd, but strangely promising. One day, after having downed a few shots of cheap rice wine, Bu stumbled over to the shrine of the Lady of the Region, a local spirit of rather modest influence, whose altar was often neglected, incense cold and untouched, with offerings brought only once a year. Bu wandered up to the entrance of the temple and sat down, swaying slightly as he hiccuped and yawned continuously, looking quite disheveled. At first, it was just a few curious children who gathered around to watch him, but soon after, idle villagers, and even members of the village council started showing up to witness the strange sight. Whispers passed from person to person. She has returned. The lady has returned. A few local women offered their opinions, and before long, incense, flowers, and ceremonial offerings were brought to the shrine. With no official declaration, Bu was quietly accepted as the living embodiment of the Lady of the Region. From that day onward, Bu no longer had to toil as a laborer. Instead, people addressed him reverently as Madam, or even Your Grace, gathering eagerly to hear the soft-spoken, exaggeratedly feminine utterances from his pale lips. Draped in flowing silk robes and crisp white satin pants, adorned with sequin slippers, heavy makeup, and glittering jewelry, Bu fully embraced his new divine persona. Within just a month, Bu had amassed a considerable following of devoted admirers. Those who once barely acknowledged his existence were now kneeling at his feet, respectfully receiving every word he uttered as though it were sacred decree. People came to him seeking charms for good fortune in business, for fertility, hoping to bear sons or daughters, as well as for gambling luck in lottery numbers. card games, horse racing, cockfighting, and more. Unlike the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, who rarely indulged such selfish requests, and unlike spirits who were preoccupied with justice or demons who demanded bribes, who asked for nothing in return, only the admiration, flattery, and gentle worship of the masses to satisfy his ego. After 3 months of near-constant rituals, spiritual trances, and ceremonial performances, both day and night, Bu's appearance began to deteriorate noticeably. Even the thickest layers of makeup could not conceal the dark circles under his eyes. The more followers he attracted, the more elaborate and convincing his performances had to be. Bu barely had time to rest or eat, and deep down, he sometimes yearned to return to the simplicity of his old life. But returning to his old life meant acknowledging the painful truth that he was just an ordinary, poor, and uneducated porter, someone others used to scornfully call that guy, or you there. He couldn't bear the shame of being dismissed and looked down upon once again. So even in his exhaustion, Bu clung desperately to his role as the lady of the region, a figure created and worshipped by the people, who lived not on food, but on incense smoke, music, and endless praise. The fate of Bu lies entirely in his own hands. Whether his story ends in redemption or ruin depends on one crucial thing: his ability to awaken to the truth of his condition. If one day Bu realizes that he is not the divine being others claim him to be, but rather a man caught in the illusion of his own making, if he sees that the role he plays is nothing more than a fevered performance, propped up by the delusions of others, then perhaps he can return to the man he once was, a simple porter, living an honest, if humble life. Even without admiration or praise from the public, at least he would be living in a world that is honest, clear, and free from the exhausting theatrics of false grandeur. In returning to that unglamorous identity, he might rediscover peace, a rare treasure compared to the unstable intoxication of public adoration. On the other hand, if Bu finds himself incapable of accepting his true self, if he clings desperately to the glittering shell of the lady of the region, continuing to smear on makeup, chant rituals, and play the part of a celestial medium simply for the sake of popularity, then he is bound to spiral deeper into illusion. The more followers he attracts, the more divine he must appear. And should the lady of the region fall out of fashion, he may simply adopt a new identity, perhaps as the Lady of Five Elements, the Celestial Empress, or even another spiritual persona, as trends demand. Such is the nature of this world, filled with fleeting fame and hollow grandeur. But if Bu continues this path, if he remains trapped in this ever-escalating masquerade, there can be only one ending. He will gradually wither, both in body and mind. Exhausted from endless performances, consumed by spiritual confusion, Bu will no longer be able to tell where the role ends and where his true self begins. In the end, if this charade persists, there may be no place left for him but the asylum among others who have also lost themselves in the illusions they could no longer escape. The story I just shared, in truth, was written with great sorrow and introspection, meant not so much for others as it was for myself. And in sharing it with you, I am not so much initiating a conversation as I am engaging in a monologue. Speaking to you is, in a way, speaking to my own reflection. For I find it hard to believe that true mutual understanding can exist when each of us is preoccupied with chasing distant ideals, wandering in separate emotional landscapes. But let me ask you something, sincerely and without judgment. Have there ever been moments in your life when you saw yourself in Bu? Not in form, but in essence? Moments where you, too, felt driven to mask your ordinary self, to put on a role that could gain approval or admiration from the world. As for me, I remember quite vividly that in the innocence of childhood, I lived freely, without awareness or concern over whether I was male or female, attractive or plain, wealthy or poor, talented or not. I existed as effortlessly as a chick nestled in the morning light, simple, carefree, and untouched by comparison. Then one day, without warning, the voices around me began to point out things I had never considered. That I wasn't as beautiful as my sister, that our family wasn't as wealthy as the neighbors, that my abilities didn't quite measure up to those of my peers. And with that, an ache was born, subtle at first, but soon a constant companion. From that point on, I began to feel a deep and gnawing sorrow, a torment born from the realization of my own ordinariness, my inability to shine, to stand out in a crowd. I felt I possessed no special skill, no remarkable trait by which I could market myself to the world. Many nights I prayed earnestly, invoking the name of the Bodhisattva of compassion, hoping that somehow I might become more beautiful, more brilliant, more successful than those around me. At the same time, I pushed myself relentlessly, staying up late, waking early, skipping meals, and losing sleep in an effort to match the accomplishments of those more gifted, more fortunate than I was, all in the hope that I could prove, if only to myself, that I was not just a zero. That, after all, is merely a small illustration, just a fragment of the vast, intricate mosaic that is our life. In truth, the greatest source of daily anguish does not stem from the inevitabilities of birth, aging, illness, or even death. These are natural laws that all must eventually face. What truly torments us, day in and day out, is far more subtle and insidious. It is the distress born from confronting the inadequacy of our own ego. We suffer because, when we look inward, we often see a self that appears so utterly unremarkable, so painfully ordinary, that it seems unworthy of affection, admiration, or even acceptance, both in our own eyes and in the eyes of others. And in those solitary moments of deep self-reflection, when the distractions fade away and the mirror of truth grows clear, we are often forced to admit, with a bitter taste in our mouth, that we are, in essence, just another face in the crowd, a large and unmistakable zero. That's when the Boo within each of us begins to stir, and slowly we begin to step onto the metaphorical stage, ready to play our role in this grand ritual of self-delusion. From that enormous zero, we try to transform ourselves, depending on opportunity, circumstances, and the expectations of those around us, into something seemingly more meaningful. Each of us then assumes a different title, a different mask, perhaps as a savior, an artist, a saint, or even a martyr. But no matter the name or costume we choose, we all share the same underlying reality, the refusal to accept our true, humble selves in favor of becoming a more glamorous, albeit artificial, version of ourselves. There is something deeply fascinating, almost paradoxical, in the fact that the very place we try so desperately to escape from, the very truth we fear the most, is precisely where great Zen masters throughout history have found their awakening. Did not the sixth patriarch boldly proclaim that, originally, there is not a single thing? Beneath all the robes and titles we drape over ourselves, you and I must, in moments of true introspection, admit one startling reality. When we genuinely look into the depths of our being, we find nothing there to cling to, no fixed identity, no role, no label. We are, in that sense, nothing at all. We are not Lady of the Realm, nor the Five Elements Goddess, nor some celestial avatar or mystic entity. And yet, and this is the miracle, even in that complete emptiness, there remains an undeniable awareness. We still see, hear, understand, and know. This capacity for perception, this inherent clarity of awareness, is something we all share, equally and completely. And that, dear friend, is exactly what the sixth patriarch meant when he said, Who would have thought that the nature of mind is inherently pure? Who would have thought it contains within itself all things? So when Bu no longer plays the role, no longer channels deities or dons a divine persona, it is not that he ceases to exist. It simply means he has shed everything false, everything that was never truly him to begin with. If, deep down, you still feel that your inner spirit medium retains her allure, that her mystique continues to captivate, and that it is preferable to wear the mask, assume the costume, and cater to the whims and expectations of the masses, then by all means carry on with the performance. No one, truly no one, will dare to stand up and criticize you, for to challenge the sanctity of a popular medium is to call into question the very beliefs and notions of the adoring crowd. And who would be foolish enough to provoke such a collective force? You can rest assured then, the stage is yours, the incense continues to burn, and the applause will not cease. But if there ever comes a day, and it may arrive quietly, without warning, when you find yourself utterly exhausted by the dizzying spectacle you've helped create, when you are forced to stare directly into your own reflection amid the aftermath of stale tea, faded flowers, and dying incense, and see not just your own weariness, but that of the crowd as well, then perhaps, just perhaps, you might summon the courage to awaken the forgotten self, the humble porter Bu, the simple soul who once labored honestly under the sun. This decision will not be easy. It will cost you dearly. You will relinquish every ounce of reverence and prestige, surrender the comforts of power and the warmth of admiration. You will be stripped of titles, of gilded robes, of sweet incense and floral tributes. In their place will come sweat and toil, physical hardship, and the cold indifference of a world that barely notices the ordinary. People often claim to be searching for truth, yet when truth reveals itself, raw, harsh, and far from the idealized vision we've carried in our hearts, we frequently choose to turn away. Instead of embracing the clarity that truth offers, we close our eyes tightly, retreating into the warm, illusory embrace of dreams, where life still shimmers with fantasy, beauty, and enchantment. Let me bring this tale to a close here, for I suddenly realize, with a touch of irony, that I might be in the midst of my own elegant trance, a performance more polished, more in vogue than even booze. Often, we fool ourselves into believing we've awoken from our illusions, thinking we've stepped out of the dream, only to later discover that we've merely rewritten its script. What gives us the strongest illusion of transcendence, the moment we think we've become someone, is often when applause erupts in response to something we do. Suddenly, from the void of insignificance, we emerge as a somebody, and that identity, bloated by praise, begins to swell and take root. And so, the cheers seduce us, encouraging us to stay asleep, to keep dreaming, to keep performing, simply so that the applause may continue. Isn't it curious, then, that in the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Bodhisattva offers us a subtle teaching? Work, yes. Do good for yourself and others. But let the three wheels, subject, object, and action, dissolve into emptiness. In other words, perform your duties without clinging to the illusion of the doer, the deed, or the recipient. Let your illusory self engage with the illusory world, fully aware of its dreamlike nature. That story reminds us how even the smallest actions, when guided by compassion and wisdom, can lead to great transformation. But the journey doesn't end there. Let us continue and see what the next story reveals about the path we walk. After the solemn procession that escorted the Blessed One and the Venerable Sangha back to the Jetavana Monastery, King Ajnasattu and his court returned to the royal palace to partake in a private banquet. The gathering was not only celebratory, but also served as a moment for reflection and further planning related to that day's great offering. As the meal began, the king addressed his ministers with a tone of deep satisfaction. "My dear ministers," he said, "I am deeply pleased and grateful for the excellent manner in which you all arranged the offering to the Buddha and the noble community of monks." Turning to his esteemed advisor Jivaka, the king continued, "Jivaka, kindly consider what more may be done so that I may fully express my heartfelt devotion to the Blessed One and the Sangha, those who dedicate themselves tirelessly to guiding sentient beings, and especially to enlightening my people." Jivaka stood in thoughtful silence for a moment before responding with composed reverence. "Your Majesty, beyond the noble offerings of food and robes that have already been presented, in my humble opinion, there is no gift more meaningful than the offering of light. Light, after all, is the symbol of wisdom and awakening. Wherever a light shines, darkness must disappear. So too, wherever the light of the Buddha and the Sangha spreads, ignorance and evil dissipate. That, sire, is my modest suggestion." "Excellent," the king exclaimed. "A most fitting proposal. I entrust you, Jivaka, with arranging a multitude of lamps and torches, that tonight we may offer light to the Buddha and the Sangha at Jetavana." With respectful assent, Jivaka bowed and accepted the royal command. The banquet then resumed, flowing gently in an atmosphere of intimacy and reverence among the king and his loyal ministers. After the grand ceremony of offering alms to the Buddha and the monastic community had concluded, King Ashantasattu, accompanied by his court officials, made his way back to the inner palace to attend a private banquet and discuss some final arrangements related to the day's sacred event. The evening gathering began with warm words from the king himself, expressing heartfelt satisfaction with how his ministers had handled the ceremonial duties. Fixing his gaze on Minister Jivaka, the king continued with earnestness in his tone. "Jivaka, I ask you to reflect on whether there remains any meaningful act we can offer as a further expression of our deepest reverence to the Blessed One and his devoted followers, those who work tirelessly for the awakening of all beings, and in particular for the benefit of my people." After contemplating for a brief moment, Jivaka rose and answered with composed sincerity. "Great King, beyond the generous offerings of food and garments your Majesty has already bestowed, there is perhaps no act more symbolically profound than presenting light. Light, as your Majesty knows, is the embodiment of wisdom and spiritual clarity. Wherever illumination appears, darkness is driven away, just as the Dharma dispels ignorance wherever it is embraced." The king, visibly moved by the response, enthusiastically agreed. "Your insight is admirable. Please see to it that an abundance of lamps and torches be prepared for tonight's offering of light to the Buddha and the noble Sangha at the Jetavana Monastery." With reverence, Jivaka accepted the royal instruction, and the feast continued in an atmosphere of harmony and mutual respect. Upon hearing the elderly beggar woman's sincere and heartfelt devotion toward the Enlightened One, the shopkeeper was visibly touched. Softening his tone, he said, "2 coins usually buy you 2 spoonfuls of oil, but I'd like to offer you 3 more, making it 5 in total. And please, take this lamp as a loan from me. I hope you will accept it." The old woman expressed her gratitude to the generous shopkeeper and departed, filled with joy and encouragement, knowing someone had empathized with her aspiration to perform a virtuous deed. Evening had not yet fallen completely when the royal guards began lighting the splendid lanterns prepared by the king. The Jetavana Monastery shimmered with vibrant energy. Gentle melodies filled the air, harmonizing with chants and praises from the king's attendants, who honored the Buddha and the Sangha on his behalf. People from all directions streamed toward the monastery, forming a crowd as lively as a festival. Among them, the elderly woman made her way with steady determination. Upon reaching the brilliantly adorned temple grounds, she hurried to prepare her humble lamp, the one she had carefully cleaned and fitted with a new wick. As she lit the flame, she quietly made a vow. May this small offering of light, presented to the Blessed One and his noble assembly, be the cause for me to one day attain clear and boundless wisdom, just like the enlightened ones in all directions. Then she thought to herself, with such a small amount of oil, this lamp may only burn until midnight. But with steadfast faith, she reaffirmed her aspiration. If it is truly my destiny to attain enlightenment as I wish in my heart, then let this tiny offering keep the flame alight throughout the night. After hanging the lamp on a tree branch, the elderly woman stepped into the monastery, paid sincere homage to the Buddha, and quietly departed. Though the king's guards took turns refilling the oil and replacing wicks in the royal lamps, few of them remained burning until dawn. Some were extinguished by wind, others burned out or became damaged. Amid the sea of countless lamps, the solitary light offered by the destitute old beggar woman blazed more brilliantly than 10,000 others and, wondrously, continued to burn until dawn with its oil entirely unspent. The Blessed One then addressed Venerable Moggallana, "My disciple, daylight has arrived. Please go outside and extinguish every lamp that is still flickering." Obeying the Master's command, the Venerable approached the beggar woman's lamp, fanning it forcefully 3 times, yet the flame refused to die. A 4th time, he grasped the hem of his saffron robe, summoned the full measure of his supernormal power, and lashed a mighty gust at the wick, only to see the light flare even more brilliantly, leaving him and the surrounding monks astonished at such an unprecedented marvel. At that moment, the Buddha arrived and said calmly, "Enough, dear disciple. Even were you to exhaust all your miraculous powers, you could never extinguish this lamp, for its flame is the radiant merit of a future Buddha." These words stirred great curiosity among the monks, who set out to discover the donor of the extraordinary lamp. After careful inquiry, they learned that the offering had been made by none other than the humble beggar woman. When this remarkable story reached the ears of King Ashantasatru, he summoned the minister Jivaka to his side and asked him directly, "Jivaka, as you are well aware, I have made considerable offerings and performed countless meritorious deeds for the Blessed One and the Sangha. I even donated a great number of oil lamps. Yet the Buddha has never spoken a word to affirm the fruits of my actions. Why then did he make such a special declaration regarding a single lamp offered by a poor old beggar woman?" The minister hesitated, unsure whether he should voice his thoughts. He stood for a long moment, clearly uneasy and reluctant to speak. Seeing this, the king reassured him, "Speak freely, Jivaka. I seek to understand my own shortcomings. Never would I presume to question the wisdom of the Blessed One." Upon hearing these sincere words, the minister's expression brightened, and with deep humility, he finally responded, "Your Majesty, if I may speak with honesty, this is merely my humble opinion based on accounts shared by those close to the monks, along with my own reflections. It seems that although your offerings were grand and plentiful, they may have lacked the wholehearted sincerity and the depth of intention that true merit requires. Perhaps your Majesty did not make a profound vow from the heart." In contrast, the minister continued, "That poor woman had nothing, but still offered what little she had with absolute devotion and unwavering faith. More importantly, her prayer was vast and selfless, a genuine aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all." Deeply moved by the minister's explanation, the king fell silent. He turned inward to reflect on his own intentions and realized the truth in Jivaka's words. And so he came to a clear understanding. The merit of offering is not determined by the quantity or value of the items given, but by the purity and depth of the heart that gives. Take a moment to reflect. What would you have done had you been in that story? Life often tests us in subtle ways. As we move forward, another story awaits, one that might touch a different corner of the heart. Nestled deep within the lush expanse of the Himalayas lies a verdant forest where the sacred Ganges River descends from the lofty mountains. Its waters, once rushing through steep cliffs and roaring cascades, now flow calmly as though pausing to rest from its long and winding journey. On the southern bank of the river, rising above the countless emerald trees, stood a majestic mango tree immense in size, with a towering trunk that seemed to pierce the sky. Its expansive branches stretched wide, casting their shade over a vast area. Some limbs reached far out over the river, reflecting their fruit-laden silhouettes in the gentle waters below. The mangoes, plump and heavy, weighed the branches down with their abundance. This grand mango tree served as the heart of a thriving monkey kingdom, home to 8,000 monkeys. United as a single nation, the group lived under the leadership of a wise and powerful monkey king, strong in body and noble in presence. The generous bounty of nature around them provided more than enough nourishment throughout the season. Yet the Monkey King, foreseeing danger, had given one crucial command. The monkeys were never to let any fruit ripen. They must eat the mangoes while they were still green. All members of the troop obeyed this rule dutifully, trusting in their leader's foresight. But fate is often unpredictable. One day, a mishap occurred. A single mango, hidden from sight behind a large ant nest, had quietly ripened. When it finally detached from its branch, it fell directly into the river. The river, ever moving, carried the golden fruit downstream until it eventually arrived at the royal bathing pool of the King of Benares. As chance would have it, the king himself was bathing at that very moment. Intrigued by the unusually large and fragrant fruit, the king retrieved it and, without waiting for his courtiers' opinions, peeled and tasted it. The flavor surpassed anything he had ever encountered. He had never before savored a fruit so exquisite. In response to the king's curiosity, a group of seasoned forest workers was summoned to provide their insight. Yet even the most experienced among them admitted they had never seen a mango tree that bore such enormous fruit. Nevertheless, the king, driven by wonder and determination, made up his mind. The source of the extraordinary mango must be found at all costs. The very next day, an entire fleet of royal boats was mobilized to journey up the river in search of the mythical tree. Provisions were packed in abundance, for the expedition would continue until they reached the base of the tree. After 3 days of steady travel, on a quiet afternoon, someone finally spotted a towering mango tree standing proudly on the slopes of a distant mountain. The joyful news spread like wildfire through the boats, rejuvenating the weary rowers. Energized by excitement, the crew rowed tirelessly through the night and continued without pause into the next day. By dusk the following day, the fleet had nearly arrived at the base of the enormous tree. What greeted them left all present soldiers, officers, and even the king himself utterly speechless. Never before had they encountered a tree of such magnificent scale. Standing beneath its colossal branches, surrounded by the grandeur of the mountains, every man present was overwhelmed by a deep sense of awe. A hushed apprehension settled over the group, as if nature itself was reminding them of their fragility and limits. As the boats approached closer to the massive tree, some movement became visible amidst the dense foliage. It wasn't just a few creatures rustling in the leaves. There were thousands of them. Drawing nearer, the king's men realized with astonishment that the entire mango tree had been overtaken by a large community of monkeys. This wasn't just a handful, it was a vast colony thriving in the canopy, clearly living there as if it were their kingdom. Standing at the prow of his royal boat, the king himself made the same observation. A deep scowl crossed his face as he realized that all those luscious mangoes he had longed to taste had likely been devoured by those impudent, wild creatures. Interpreting the monkey's presence as an unforgivable act of disrespect, the king issued a stern command. His entire army was to surround the tree without letting a single monkey escape. At sunrise the next morning, they would begin their assault and eliminate every last one. Meanwhile, among the branches above, panic quickly spread through the monkey tribe. Though their leader, the mighty Monkey King, attempted to calm them down, the growing fear in their eyes revealed they sensed a terrible disaster was about to befall them. That night, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility and the looming threat to his tribe, the Monkey King sat in deep contemplation, tirelessly searching for a way to rescue the thousands of lives under his care. Then, as if struck by sudden inspiration, he leaped from the safety of the treetop onto a thick branch stretching out over the river. The river beneath was broad and swift, far too treacherous for any ordinary monkey to attempt a crossing. But the determined leader knew there was no other choice. Gathering every ounce of strength, he launched his body across the water, landing on the distant bank after a tremendous jump fueled by desperation and duty. Once there, he searched the forest floor for long, strong vines, which he painstakingly tied together and fastened one end securely around the trunk of a sturdy tree. Without resting, he then wrapped the other end of the vine around his own body, transforming himself into a bridge between life and death. With resolve etched into every fiber of his being, the Monkey King again summoned his strength and leapt back toward the giant mango tree on the opposite side. Yet fate did not cooperate easily. Just as his hands gripped a branch reaching over the river, the vine grew taut, falling short by only the length of a single outstretched arm. The tension snapped his legs backward, leaving him suspended in the air between the two banks, arms clinging to the branch and legs stretched back by the vine. That night, under the pale moonlight and rustling leaves, the 8,000 monkeys, one by one, began the perilous journey across the makeshift bridge, their king's own body. Faced with the sight of their great leader enduring such unimaginable strain, many monkeys hesitated, their hearts heavy with grief. Tears streamed down their faces as they grappled with the painful truth. They had to step on their beloved king to survive. There was no time for sentiment, no space for sorrow. Either they must move forward to ensure the safety of all, or linger in mourning and risk annihilation with the coming dawn. The command was firmly repeated once more, leaving no room for hesitation in the hearts of the monkeys as their resolute leader, despite his suffering, urged them to cross. One by one, the monkeys began to cross the improvised bridge, moving as gently and cautiously as possible, fully aware that they were treading on the back of a noble being whose selfless heart had given everything for their survival. The Monkey King, though feigning from pain and exhaustion multiple times, summoned every last ounce of willpower to stay conscious and maintain his grip on the branch, determined to ensure that not a single member of his tribe would be left behind. When nearly all the monkeys had safely crossed, the last one approached the treacherous Devadatta, a monkey known for his malice and envy, who had long harbored a deep resentment toward the noble king. Seizing what he believed was his moment, Devadatta launched himself violently onto the Monkey King's back, deliberately applying his full weight, intending to cause harm while pretending to cross like the others. The Monkey King, though racked with unimaginable pain, endured the brutal pressure and tightened his grip on the tree, refusing to let go until even his betrayer had reached safety. Once on the far side, Devadatta turned and looked back, only to see his once hated leader lying still, his body limp and motionless in the dim light of dawn. Struck by guilt and awed by the boundless compassion he had witnessed, Devadatta lowered his head in shame and wept, overcome by remorse and admiration. The following morning, King Benares ordered his troops to advance toward the giant mango tree. But to everyone's astonishment, the entire troop of monkeys had mysteriously vanished, leaving no trace of where they had gone. As the soldiers approached the base of the tree and looked up, they were met with a deeply moving scene. A massive monkey, unlike any they had seen before, was lying still, his body forming a bridge between a high branch and a vine stretching across the river. The creature appeared unconscious, completely motionless, as if utterly exhausted from an unimaginable effort. According to the forest hunters who knew the jungle well, this was no ordinary monkey. It was the leader of the troop. The king, upon hearing this and piecing together the events, suddenly understood the truth. The Monkey King had used his own body to form a bridge, sacrificing himself so that all the others in his tribe could escape to safety. Deeply moved by this act of supreme selflessness, King Benares was struck with remorse. He reflected on his own selfish actions, the petty desire for sweet mangoes, and the reckless use of royal power to fulfill such a trivial craving. In that moment of realization, the king recognized that his narrow anger and worldly attachment had nearly led to an unnecessary massacre. He turned to his hunters, whose previous eagerness to kill had faded into silence, and declared loudly for all to hear, "Let this be a lesson to us all." Immediately, the king ordered a retreat of the army. He then had the Monkey King gently lowered from the tree, and with great tenderness, he personally cared for the brave creature until he regained consciousness. That noble monkey, whose boundless compassion saved his people, was none other than a previous incarnation of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. Each of these stories is like a facet of a diamond, distinct, but part of a greater whole. As we move to the next, we continue to piece together a fuller picture of life's deeper meaning. Long ago, in a remote part of India, there stood a serene mountain known as Sun, covered in lush vegetation and blooming flowers throughout the year. The mountain remained largely untouched by human presence, making it a perfect sanctuary for those seeking spiritual solitude and meditation. Over time, this peaceful mountain began attracting an increasing number of monks and ascetics, eventually becoming a revered spiritual center where thousands of devout individuals would journey to pay respects, make offerings, and host vegetarian feasts for the community of noble monks. One day, a wealthy elder decided to bring his family to the mountain to prepare a beautifully crafted vegetarian meal in honor of the monastic community. Curious and hopeful individuals from nearby areas joined in the procession to participate in the meritorious event. Among the gathering was a poor young woman, no older than 17 or 18, who thought to herself, "Today the nobleman is offering food to the monks. If I go as well, perhaps I'll finally have a chance to eat my fill, especially since it's been several days since I've had even a modest meal." With a heart full of hope and a cheerful face, she quickened her pace towards the mountain. As the young impoverished girl reached the mountaintop, her eyes widened in awe at the elegant and fragrant array of vegetarian dishes meticulously prepared by the elder. She couldn't help but think to herself, surely this elder must have cultivated great virtues and performed many good deeds in his past lives. Such merit must have ripened into his current wealth and fortune. She continued reflecting, and now, by offering such a generous meal to these venerable monks, he is once again planting seeds of virtue. His blessings in future lives will no doubt surpass even those of this one. Turning her thoughts inward, the girl sighed silently. As for me, how pitiful my condition is. Surely, it must be due to the lack of merit in my previous existence that I am suffering such hardship now. If I don't start cultivating good karma today, my next life might be even worse than this one. With a determined heart, she pondered further. I still have 2 coins tucked away, the only savings I've managed to hold on to. Though they could buy me a couple of simple rice cakes to ease this gnawing hunger, perhaps it would be more meaningful to offer them to the monks instead. After all, I won't die from missing one more meal. After much contemplation, the impoverished young woman quietly waited until the monks and nuns had completed their serene meal. Then, with reverence in her heart, she reached into her tattered pouch and gently offered the 2 small coins she had been saving, presenting them respectfully to the abbot. On the mountain, it was customary for only the steward monk, the one assigned to welcome donors, to offer blessings on behalf of the entire monastic assembly. Yet, on this occasion, something remarkable happened. The abbot himself rose from his seat, walked toward the young girl, and personally bestowed a heartfelt blessing. With a warm and compassionate voice, the abbot declared, "All the treasures of the world are already contained within the heart of this young woman, who has made an offering to the renunciants. Her act of giving is a true seed of merit. May she forever be free from the bonds of poverty." Hearing these words, the young girl was overwhelmed with joy. Her heart brimmed with a happiness so profound that words could scarcely capture it. Moved by her sincerity, the entire assembly of practitioners offered her food and care, making the occasion one of unmatched spiritual warmth and unity. After enjoying a satisfying meal shared generously by the monks and other kind-hearted devotees, the young woman leisurely stepped outside the monastery. She wandered toward the base of a massive, ancient tree and lay down to rest beneath its vast sheltering branches. Fatigue soon overtook her, and she drifted into a peaceful slumber, unaware of her surroundings. By that time, the sun had already begun to descend toward the western horizon. Yet strangely, the shadows beneath the tree had not shifted an inch. Looking upward, one could see a wondrous formation. A radiant 5-colored cloud gently hovered above the treetop, as though forming a celestial canopy over the sleeping girl, a phenomenon unlike any witnessed before. At that very moment, the king of the land happened to be passing by on his chariot. Still mourning the recent passing of his beloved queen, he had taken to traveling the countryside in hopes of easing his sorrow and finding solace in nature's beauty. As his procession approached the great tree, his eyes fell upon the mysterious sight of a sleeping maiden, blessed by a divine-looking cloud above her. Amazed by the ethereal beauty of the girl and the heavenly omen above her, the king whispered in admiration, "Who is this maiden who dares to rest here so peacefully? Her elegance rivals the moon goddess herself. With such grace and radiant charm, she is sure to capture the hearts of many." Deeply moved, he ordered his attendants to gently carry the sleeping girl into his royal carriage. Suddenly awakened from her slumber, the girl opened her eyes wide in panic. Seeing herself being lifted into a royal carriage by strangers, she cried out in alarm, "Oh, Buddha, what is happening? Who are you people, and where are you taking me?" One of the attendants immediately tried to calm her with a gentle voice. "Please, do not be afraid. We mean you no harm. We are servants of His Majesty the King, and by royal command, we have been sent to escort you to the palace." Once the girl had been carefully seated beside the king in his opulent carriage, His Majesty turned toward her and, with a tone full of warmth, inquired, "May I ask, young lady, how old are you this year?" "I am 18, she replied softly, her voice still trembling slightly from confusion and awe. The king gazed at her with admiration and said sincerely, "You are truly beautiful, so graceful and lovely that you have captured my heart. I would be honored to make you my first queen. Will you accept this proposal?" The girl glanced at the king, noticing his regal yet youthful appearance. A soft smile crept onto her lips, but in her heart, uncertainty lingered. She silently thought, could this truly be happening? How could a poor girl like me, who was merely seeking a free meal, suddenly be chosen to become the first queen? Lost in disbelief, her thoughts swirled in silence, leaving her unable to form any reply. "What's the matter, my lady? Are you not pleased with my offer?" that you remained silent without a reply?" the king asked gently, surprised by her lack of response. The girl bowed slightly and, with a humble voice, replied, "Your Majesty, forgive my hesitation. I find myself in doubt. Am I truly awake, or is this merely a dream?" The king chuckled warmly and reassured her, "You are very much awake, dear. This is no illusion. You are indeed living in the present moment, and I assure you, everything you see is real." Not long after, the royal carriage arrived at the palace gates. Wasting no time, the king made a public proclamation to the entire nation. The young woman was to be officially declared the first queen. From that moment on, the once destitute girl began a new life of splendor. Surrounded by luxury and respect, she dined on the finest meals, wore garments of exquisite fabric, and was treated with honor by all. Yet, despite her rise to nobility and all the admiration she received, her heart remained deeply rooted in gratitude. She constantly reminded herself, "This fortune I now enjoy was born from a simple act of kindness, giving away those 2 coins in charity." Moved by this realization, she humbly approached the king and said, "Your Majesty, I am forever indebted to your grace and favor for elevating me to such a high position. However, I feel I must also repay another debt, that to the venerable monk who received my small offering and blessed me. With your permission, I would like to make an offering at the monastery to express my gratitude." The king smiled, clearly moved by her sincerity. "Excellent," he said. "You are free to do as your heart desires. I am pleased by your sense of gratitude." Not long after, the king and queen arranged for an opulent and grand vegetarian feast, preparing numerous offerings of the highest purity and elegance. Dozens of carts were filled with delicacies and sacred items, then transported up the sacred mountain of Bamsen to be presented to the Sangha. After the monastic community had graciously received the offerings and completed their meal, it came time to bless the royal donors. However, unlike the previous occasion, the revered abbot did not appear personally to bestow blessings. Instead, it was the guestmaster monk who came forward on behalf of the monastery. This unexpected change puzzled both the king and queen. They whispered among themselves with growing curiosity. "When I donated merely 2 copper coins in the past, the venerable abbot himself came out to offer his blessings. But today, despite our grand and abundant offerings, he does not appear. Why is that?" The assembled crowd shared the same perplexity. Many whispered among themselves, clearly echoing the same thoughts. Observing the stir among the gathering, the wise abbot finally came forth to address the assembly. With calm composure, he offered this teaching. In the past, when Her Majesty gave only 2 small copper coins, though humble in material worth, they were given with a pure and sincere heart. That heartfelt generosity carried great spiritual value and was truly noble. Today, though the offerings are abundant and materially impressive, they are tainted with a subtle sense of pride and self-importance, which makes them different in essence from the former gift. You must understand that in the Dharma, it is not the quantity or luxury of material offerings that holds true merit, but the intention and purity of the mind behind the giving. That is why I did not personally come forward to offer blessings this time. May everyone here come to truly understand how the Dharma supports those who give not with wealth, but with genuine compassion and humility. Upon hearing these words from the venerable abbot, both the king and queen were overwhelmed with a mix of shame and joyful realization. For the first time, they truly grasped the profound meaning and value of the act of giving. As we've seen through these stories, the teachings of the Buddha are not just about religion. They are about living, about being aware, being kind, being true to the moment. They remind us that life is impermanent, suffering is a part of existence, but peace is possible through mindfulness, compassion, and understanding. Thank you for joining us on this journey. May the lessons you've heard stay with you and may you carry them gently into your everyday life. Until next time, be well, and thank you for watching.